So we are ready to start this rules committee, this rules subcommittee. First item is roll call.
Member Soldner,
Yes, here.
Member Erickson,
Here.
Member Wendt,
Here.
Member Martin,
Here.
Member Woolrab,
Here.
Member Metzger is going to be late, Member Barnett.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, first item is the approval of the March 31st minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes. Motion by Member Erickson, second by Member Martin. Any questions or discussion? If not, roll call vote.
Member Barnett,
Yes.
Member Woolrab,
Yes.
Member Martin,
Yes.
Member Wendt,
Yes.
Member Erickson,
Yes.
Member Soldner.
Yes. Any appearances by the public? I don't believe we have any.
There are not.
All right, great. So we are ready to go on to departmental matters. And the first one is 4A under the county administrator. The first item is 4A 1A, and that is recommend amendment to chapter 20-2 of the county board rules, including the following, which is letter A, and I've been instructed I don't need to read that word for word. We have that in our agenda. I will comment that, you know, we had a rather vigorous discussion at our previous meeting, so obviously we can discuss now, but I wanted to go ahead and remind people that we've kind of gone through some of this, so, but we haven't deliberated as a committee, so would someone like to make a motion and a second for 4A 1A? Motion by Member Woolrab, second? Second by Member Martin. Okay, so we are ready to discuss. Who would like to open the floor? Member Woolrab.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I should say if I seem a little distracted, it's just because it's pouring down rain here and I'm just kind of amazed at it. And so I have a question about 1AA. The board will hold public hearings on a decennial basis. And I guess I would ask what the definition is of a public hearing for this, what the intention is of this here for that.
Well, our legal counsel's in a conversation here. When they get done, they can answer. Mr. Spano, would you repeat your question?
Me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm asking on 1A, as proposed number 4, departmental matters, A1AA, board will hold public hearings on a decennial basis. So considering, I think we had a question at our last public meeting, I guess we called it, you know, what, I'm looking for a definition of what constitutes a public hearing in this context.
Well, that would be subject to interpretation since the state's attorney's office did not draft this proposal. I haven't spent a whole lot of time going out and researching what constitutes a public hearing versus a public meeting. I suppose if we got down the road and this rule were somehow would become part of the rules in the future, that's something that we'd have to explore.
Well, I guess. So I guess it's not clear to me what we're trying to accomplish here. If it's just sort of the same sort of thing we've just had, or having in the midst of having concerning this, it's not perfectly set. It's not satisfactory to me to, as the way it's constituted. You know, if we're looking for something with more organized input or something that requires a public notice like we do, say, for our show bus, then it's something different to me, I guess.
All right. Anyone else? Any further discussion? Okay. If not, then are we ready to vote? Roll call vote, and the chairman will vote.
Member Barnett,
Yes.
Member Went,
No.
Member Martin,
Yes.
Member Woolrab,
Yes,
Member Erickson,
No.
Chairman Soldner.
No.
You have 3 and 3.
All right.
Motion.
Am I correct? A tie vote is a no vote?
Needs a
Tie
majority
vote
vote.
is a no vote.
Okay. All right. Motion does not pass then. Next item, 4A, 1B, and again, it's written into the, in our agenda. I would ask before we take a motion in a second on this, if it's allowed, could I have Mr. Spanos? I'd like a little more information on the Illinois Voting Rights Act. I guess I'm not sure exactly what that is, if you have any information.
The agenda item was 1 small a, which included subparts capital A and capital B. So as the way I understand it, the vote was taken on 1 small a, so that A and B did not pass, and now we're into subpart B. Is that right?
Right.
That was not my understanding. I thought we were on four
That's
A,
my understanding.
one lowercase a, capital A,
So
and we're taking B as a separate matter.
we need to make it a clarification, because that was the motion, and we said it as presented in the agenda. And if you look at the agenda, the capital A and capital B are part of the small a, which is the one motion that's under A1A, right? Then you move on to B. So I guess we're going to need to clarify that.
Okay. So I guess then would the motion maker, do we need to go ahead and have that motion maker make a second motion, or what's the proper procedure?
Yeah, I think if it was the understanding, right now, the way this would go down in the record is that small a did not pass.
Okay.
That includes subpart capital A and capital B. So if there is a motion to clarify that, or a separate motion, then the chairman would be free to consider that motion.
Okay, well, I guess, what's the pleasure of the committee? Member Erickson?
I mean, yeah, it was my understanding we were only doing capital A. I mean, that's fine, but I mean, we just denied capital A, so can we do capital B now and just make a motion to do capital B now? I mean, I don't know.
I think that's perfectly acceptable. You just need
Okay.
another motion in the same, and then in the future, I guess, the rest of the way through, so that we're clear on the agenda. The way it's laid out is B, that's bold in your agenda, that starts with recommend, includes E and all of its subparts. So
Okay,
you won't be voting separately necessarily on each of the subparts unless you have a motion to amend or a separate motion.
okay.
Okay?
So for B then, we need someone to make a motion and a second on part B. Motion by member Wolrab, second. Member Barnett, okay? So then discussion on part B. Member Erickson?
mean, I don't know if this is a question directed to a comment or a question. I guess it's probably both. Directed to legal counsel. I mean, we already have these requirements. I mean, we're just codifying what we already have the responsibility to do anyway, don't we? And we have to follow the Voting Rights Act anyway. Don't we have to file federal and state law?
That's correct.
Well, I think Chairman Soldner had asked me that started that just prior conversation to comment upon the Illinois Voting Rights Act, a little bit of the history, and maybe answering that question will help answer your question, Mr. Erickson. The Illinois Voting Rights Act, first of all, is not applicable to county governments on its face. The General Assembly specifically stated that it is applicable only to the General Assembly with respect to its legislative and representative redistricting. So it does not on its face apply. And then we have a question, if that's the case, which clearly it is. I can read the first few lines of the act itself. It says, in any redistricting plan pursuant to Article 4, Section 3 of the Illinois Constitution, Article 4, Section 3 applies only to the General Assembly, does not apply to county government. And it goes on, and from there it goes on. So that section of the statute provides authority to the General Assembly, and it doesn't provide any authority to the county government. And so we could potentially, if you were to enact it, have a Dillon's rule issue where county governments are subject to the authority granted to them and nothing more, right? So this section, this statute does not grant the county government authority under Dillon's rule. And then the other simple answer is it comes down to the requirement is one person, one vote. And we have to set up districts and maps eventually that are consistent with one person, one vote. And as long as we do that, we're in compliance with all of the acts that are specifically referenced in the proposed amendment.
All right. Member Went?
Yeah, that is correct. What he's talking about is correct. That was in the 70s that came out where the Supreme Court said that you had to have one vote for one, and that's what changed the whole makeup of county government, because then we had our townships. In the past, each township sometimes had a rep on the board. And of course, you had townships with as little as 400 or 500 people would have a member on the board, and townships with 25,000 or 30,000 people would have one member on the board. And since that court decision, it has been the general practice is to follow the census, which then coincides with the Constitution on that. And I think that almost all counties in Illinois and probably throughout the country have followed that procedure, that their population distribution is done based on the census. So that I think this is irrelevant. We don't need this because we have to meet the federal laws anyway. So I think it's just a superfluous amendment or a thing to put into our rules. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Member Barnett?
Well, and I'm open to suggestions from you, Mr. Chairman, or Assistant State's Attorney Spanos on how to properly structure this. But I guess I would make a motion to amend this, that the very last line of that paragraph where it says influence districts, I would make a motion to amend this to put a period there and then strike, quote, as defined by the Illinois Voting Rights Act of 2011, unquote.
All right. That is an amendment. We need a second.
And
Second by Member Walrab. All right, so now we're gonna have discussion as under the amendment as stated by Member Barnett.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, to clarify with Mr. Spanos, I mean, if we did that, based on what you had said about removing that specific site to the Illinois Voting Rights Act of 2011, I mean, would the rest of the language in this be acceptable for us to include, or would we have to change this in some other way?
My concern is that you're leaving in the requirements of the Illinois Voting Act, Voting Rights Act, without, and just taking out the citation. So
Everything
that would be my,
after Illinois County's code, you mean?
correct. So that would
Okay.
be my concern, and it would potentially subject us to a challenge based on Dillon's rule.
Member Wolrab?
Mr. Spanos, would you mind explaining, and maybe you did already, Dylan's rule just very briefly, so I understand that?
Sure. A lot of people know it as home rule authority. The Constitution creates either home rule authority or not. If you don't have home rule authority, your authority then is specific to the statutory and constitutional grants of power given to you by the state. So in other words, you have to do what you do by authority of the state. If you're home rule, then you can do anything that's legal, of course, that's not restricted, that you're not prohibited from doing. So that's what Dillon's rule is about.
Member Barnett?
If I may, I would like to amend my amendment and would strike that whole last sentence of paragraph B. So everything after Illinois County's code.
All right, just a point of question. Will that satisfy the Voting Rights Act issue, Mr. Spanos?
Yes, I believe it would.
Okay.
You have to get a second.
Right, I was gonna say, so initially, Member Wolrab, I believe, seconded. She's coming back here, so, okay, thumbs up, does that suffice as a second? All right, all right,
I agree to the amendment of the amendment.
okay. All right. So discussion then on that amendment, striking all the words after Illinois County Code, the last sentence. Member Erickson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then I guess I go back to my original question then. I mean, my first question was, doesn't this already apply anyway? And the answer was no, because the Illinois Voting Rights Act of 2011 doesn't apply to counties. Okay, so we've taken that part out, but doesn't the US Constitution and federal law and the Illinois Constitution, the Illinois County codes apply to what we're doing already?
Member, Mr. Spanos?
Yes, and basically what this rule now says is that the county will follow the law, or that it's now the county code to follow the law that's already the law. So your point is, yeah,
We're already required to do this.
right, correct.
Mr. Grant, did you have a question?
It's redundant.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, it's just redundant. We don't need to amend it because we already have to do it by the federal laws that was put out in the court decision back in the 70s of one man, one vote that applies to the counties. And this is just kind of mucking up the rules book because we already have it. So I would say it just doesn't make sense to do it.
Member Wolrab?
I understand what Member Wynn's saying, and I would agree on a number of things along those same lines, but I think it doesn't hurt to put it in there because I think it makes it clear how to begin to go about this when people are thinking of doing it. You know, not the same people are always going to be around the table, not the same state's attorney. And I think we want to make it crystal clear that we're going to be abiding by the laws now and in the future.
All right. Mr. Spanos, go ahead.
I'd just like to add, as I'm reading through this again, now in a different version, I want to add one other question mark that I have, and that is with respect to when you codify to say best practices, but then don't codify what the best practices are, then it leaves it open to interpretation and what is a best practice. What you might think is best practice might be different, as Ms. Walrab points out, someone who comes along down the road thinks is best practice. So I would be concerned about the vagueness of that term as it's used in this context. And I'm sorry I missed that the first time, but
All right.
I was trying to catch up.
All right. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, if not, ready to vote, roll call vote.
Member Barnett,
Yes.
Member Went,
No.
Member Martin,
Yes.
Member Woolrab,
Yes,
Member Erickson,
No,
Member Soldner,
No.
3 and
Okay.
3.
Again, it's a 3-3 vote, so the motion fails. So we are now ready to move on to 4B, and let's make sure that I understand. We are going to take these, all items, the letter E, which is stricken. All right,
You voted on the amendment.
okay, you are
We-
right.
Now we need to vote on whether or not, the amendment has not passed. Okay, now you need to vote on whether or not the rules should be, a recommendation should be made.
Without the amendment.
Correct.
Okay. So, Member Barnett?
I guess a clarifying question. So, I mean, if part of this that's in here is for the Illinois Voting Rights Act, which doesn't apply to county government, I mean, should we really be voting on this? I mean, I don't think it's going to pass, but suppose it passes, then we're implementing something that county government
Yeah.
doesn't have the authority to do. So, like,
We're down.
Member Mr. Spanos, your comment?
Remember, I guess at this point, you're voting on whether or not to make a recommendation to the executive committee, right? So you're not passing it and putting it into law at this point.
Okay. All right, so we do have an initial motion and a second from the initial item, correct? Okay. So any more discussion? Okay, ready to vote, roll call vote, please.
You gotta hit the button, I apologize. Mike. Member Barnett,
no.
Member Went,
No.
Member Martin,
No.
Member Woolrab,
I abstain.
Member Erickson,
no,
Member Soldner,
No. Okay, 5 no votes, 1 abstain, motion fails. So now we are ready to go to 4B. And this motion will strike the letter E in its entirety. And again, these numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all part of letter B, correct?
Yes, agenda item small b,
Okay, so we need a motion to,
1B.
to, to do all 4 of those then. So I need, entertain a motion to recommend all 4 of those go on to the executive committee. Someone want to make that a motion? Member Barnett, second? Second by Member Wolrab. Okay, ready for discussion? Member Walrap, go ahead.
And I'm seconded to discuss it, and I'm just wondering if we necessarily, in going through these, if we want to do them paragraph by paragraph, rather than doing them as each of the group, like we're just doing now, and don't run into the, so we don't run into the same problem we just did before. On this one, I would recommend, so number 3, any board member wishes to deliver a report to their, I'm sorry, excuse me, any board member who wishes to deliver a report to their assigned committees or the full board. I'm wondering here what constitutes a report. Is this a written, are we talking about a written report? And should we make a motion then to amend this to a written report?
So under 3, the first line, you want to put written before report.
Yes.
All right, that's an amendment. Someone like to second that amendment? Second by Member Barnett. Okay? So,
And
1 second. Member Metzger, we're taking 1, 2, 3, and 4 all as one item. It's all part of the motion for letter B. Okay, Member Walrab, go ahead.
thank you, Mr. Chair. On number 4, then, is this new? Any board member who wishes to address an agenda item of committee of which they are not a member may do so at said committee meeting with permission of committee chairperson. And if it is new, either way, I'd like to amend that to say at the end of that, if denied by chairperson, they may be approved by a majority vote of the committee.
All right. So parliamentarian, do we need another second for the second amendment? Okay. So do we have a second on that? I think we did already. Mr. Barnett, didn't you? Yes, Mr. Barnett. Okay, all right.
I'm sorry, are you taking discussion on the first amendment, or are you including this all together as I'm typing this up? I'm sorry.
What's the proper thing to do?
We have a second amendment that's on the table now with a second. So the discussion can address that we don't have a second on the second amendment motion.
I have not taken a second on the second amendment. I just have a Woolrab once asked about number 4, and if there should be an amendment adding language to that. I just have an amendment to the very first one on number 3 to add the word written before report with a second. Woolrab Barnett.
Okay, then we need a second for the second amendment. Member Barnett. Okay. So we are still. Okay, sorry.
Yes, ma'am. I have one amendment. The first amendment was to add the word written before report in number 3. And then the second amendment was number 4. After the word chairperson at the end was to add, and if denied by committee chairperson, then they may be approved by a majority of the committee.
Everybody get that? Okay. So again, right now we are discussing item B, letter E, which is stricken, and then items 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have amendments. Is there any more discussion before we discuss before we vote on the amendments? Member Erickson.
I know that former member Sego Biano would be upset with me, but I have a question about this and I probably should have raised it before the meeting. He won. I mean, has anybody talked to any countywide elected official to ask them if that creates any prejudice or issues for them to get this at least 5 business days beforehand? I don't want them to say, well, I don't even prep my report till the day of the meeting. I mean, that's what we get on some committees. I mean, I don't know.
I guess my response would be similar to what Mr. Spano said earlier. All we're really doing is recommending this to go on to the executive committee. So hopefully in the meantime, if they have a problem with it, they can reach out to us. But I know I personally haven't talked to anyone.
Well, I'm just saying that maybe somebody ought to ask them. I
Okay,
mean, they're not going to be aware of the issue unless someone tells them.
okay. Well, I can, as chairman of the committee, I will reach out to the elected officials and find out if they have an issue with this. Member Barnett?
Yeah, I guess, I'm the one that rewrote this section of the rules. I'll tell you that I don't like getting reports from people the day of our meeting, which is why I put 5 days in there. So, I mean, some of the countywide officials may have an issue getting their reports in within 5 days. I don't know. I mean, we can wiggle that a bit, I guess. I I think probably the most important thing is just that they're submitted by whenever Ms. Morlock sends the agenda out. I mean, I guess that's what I really care about. So if we end up having to move that a little bit, I mean, I'm okay with that.
All right, Ms. Rodriguez, you have a question or a comment?
I have a comment, Chairman Soldner.
All right.
I appreciate Member Barnett's desire to meet the OMA requirements or to support and assist Ms. Morlock to meet those. But it would definitely need to have a little more wiggle room than that, because that is the requirement to get it out 48 hours, the entire packet. And we love for you to come be a county administrator for a day and put together a packet with us, because it is a challenge to make sure it's precise and free of mistakes and numbered correctly. So in that sense, already Ms. Morlock sends out communications to department heads, which includes elected department heads, to provide us with those written reports ahead of time. I think there is only one department head I know of that consistently brings the report almost right before the committee meeting, and that is our treasurer, and has expressed as much that that is the manner in which they provide the most updated information to you. I'm only speaking in not opinions, but just perspective here from county administration, that we would definitely try to support all department heads to at least get their reports to us 5 days ahead of a meeting, because we have to post it 2 days ahead. And so just perspective only. That's all we're providing here at this point.
All right. Other comments? Member Erickson?
Well, that'll definitely throw the county treasurer off, because I can't remember any time since I've sat on the finance committee that we didn't get a report like about 3:30 in the afternoon before the finance committee meeting. I can't remember ever getting one. Maybe another member does, but I mean, we never do. I mean, never have. I mean, so that's definitely going to affect her. So just pointing that out, it is. And I guess her report would be denied if she didn't make the rule, wouldn't it?
Yeah, maybe it would go to a stand-up then or something. Member Wolrab? You're muted.
As a member of the finance committee, I agree to what you said, Mr. Erickson. We've never gotten one ahead of time. And it actually, my preference for that, on talking about that particular report, would be based on, we don't take any action on it, although it would be nice to have the most updated figures. I prefer to get it late rather than get it an hour before the meeting where I can't digest it. And it's a very good report, and I know she does her darndest to get us the best figures possible, but it's impossible to digest like either during the meeting. Some people are working and they can't even look at it until they walk into the meeting. That used to happen to me, honestly. And I don't want to receive anything, especially as important and detailed as that, you know, an hour ahead of my meeting time. It's just not a good way for me to represent my constituents. I can't analyze it. I can't think through questions. I can't go back to Ms. McNeil at that point and ask her. I have to ask her the question in public. And Ms. Member Segoviano certainly wouldn't like that. So I am all in favor of this rule. Thank you.
Member Went, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I have my hand up. I just wondered when you're talking about the treasurer's office, I don't know what authority we have to direct the treasurer to do anything. My understanding is that the elected officials run their offices and that the board really has no authority. I don't know what the state's attorney would say on that, but that was my understanding. It's very difficult for us to tell the different elected officials how to run their offices. So maybe.
Member Erickson, you have a question?
Well, I just had a comment. My statement about the treasurer's report was not a criticism of the county treasurer. I want to be clear about that. I don't want to get a phone call or an email. It was just a comment about the process that we go through. So it's not saying good or bad. It's just saying that's what has happened since I've been on the finance committee. I just want to clarify what I said.
All right, Member Metzger.
So based on what Member Erickson and Member Barnett said, it appears that there is wiggle room. So would 3 business days be more appropriate versus 5, or 48 hours? Well, 48 hours wouldn't do it. So 3 days versus 5. I don't care. I'm just saying if that's a concern, then that's another potential option. I'm not making a motion at this point. We're in discussion.
Member Barnett?
Well, I guess I would offer to the rules subcommittee if Chairman Soldner is going to follow back up with the treasurer. I mean, if we were to pass this as is, I'm happy to make an amendment to it at exec and change the time frame there if it needs to be changed, or at the full board, or however long it takes to nail that down a little bit longer.
All right, Ms. Rodriguez?
Thank you, Chairman. I would also respectfully remind the membership that it was at your direction to county administration to try to limit the number of stand-up meetings. And we have really tried very hard not to bring things to stand up, because in general, that is a reflection of us not having the information in a timely way for you to review. And so I think that what I'm trying to express is I don't want to see that as a panacea to shortening the time, right, of provision of reports. I want you to have the information you need with a cover memo in plenty of time. I think the treasurer is a great example of how the most up-to-date information doesn't necessarily support that. But in general, if reports are allowed to be submitted to county administration only 2 and 3 days ahead of time, that doesn't necessarily even give us time to digest the information, research it, and even discuss its implications on operations or on budget. And in general, we require much more time than that unless there's some kind of mitigating circumstance, like a grant application that came due at very short notice. And so all I'm really recommending is that we do not set ourselves up for a situation where stand-up committees are then the solution for shortening the amount of time that department heads have to turn in required information.
Member Barnett?
Well, I guess and Administrator Rodriguez, please correct me if I'm not understanding you correctly. It sounds like this 5-day window is okay and works well with administration. We just know collectively there might be a couple outliers we might have to work with a little bit to try to massage um, the timeliness of maybe some of their reports when they come in.
Yes, thank you. Member Barnett, we can work with 5 business days. That is helpful to us. And if there are other circumstances that we would need the chairperson's permission to allow submission, we would definitely make those types of communications. I hope I'm answering your question.
All right. Any other questions? Member Erickson?
That's just a comment. I mean, this is not my hill to die on. I'm not gonna die on this rule. I mean, it's just, I would respectfully suggest that you do let the countywide elected officials know of this rule and seek their input. So when we get to the executive committee meeting, we may have some input from them on that. So that's only my suggestion.
I will do that. I'll make an effort to do that. All right. Other discussion? Okay, help me out here, Mr. Spanos. We're ready to vote on one of the amendments. Is it the second one or the first one?
The motion is to advance it with both amendments at this point.
Okay.
So
So the motion then again is to submit these rule changes to the executive committee with the amendments. Does anyone need to have those read again?
well, Jim, Mr. Chairman Soldner, sorry. First, you need to vote on the amendment, right? Vote on the amendments.
Okay,
And then you need to vote on whether or not to make the recommendation.
okay. So again, we don't take them separately, we take them together.
I think it's pretty clear what you have. You have two amendments. You can take them both together. If
Okay.
somebody wants to do it separately, they'll let you know.
Okay. So we're ready then to take those separate, Member Erickson?
I thought we were going to do them separately because I still have some comments on the other amendment.
Okay.
Um,
So let's do the first one then, which would be the addition to number 3, which adds the word written to right before a report. Is everybody with me on that? Any questions on that? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Member Barnett,
Yes.
Member Metzger. Yes. Member Went,
Yes.
Member Martin,
Yes.
Member Woolrab,
Yes,
Member Erickson,
Yes.
Chairman Solner.
Yes. So the next amendment was then to number 4. And what that addition was at the last part of the amendment was, if denied by the chair, may be, I can't read my writing, but it has to do with, if, it may be approved by the majority of the committee. Is that correct, Member Wolrab?
yes, yes, it is. We could say if denied, may be approved to speak by a majority vote of the committee.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion on that? Member Erickson?
Well, I'm not really opposed to a majority vote, but the chairman does have to have some authority to move the meeting along. I mean, if it's getting hung up on just comments, sometimes it's chairman's got to be allowed chairperson, sorry. The chairperson has to be allowed some discretion to kind of move the meeting along. You know, you know, to me, I don't know of any chairperson that doesn't allow people to speak. I mean, occasionally if someone's just going off on a tangent, you gotta kind of rein them in sometimes. But I'm just a little leery about having a vote on every member of the board coming to a meeting, and, wanting to address the committee. I mean, they do that already, and I don't know of too many chairpersons that have denied anybody the right to do so. I mean, I never have. I can't think that I have. I mean, but I could also see where that could be abused. So.
Member Went?
I agree with Chuck on that. I think we ought to leave it as it is so that the chairman has the ability to do that, to move the meetings on right along and stuff. And I agree with Chuck. Is most cases the chairman will allow people to speak, but it's just a matter of letting the chairmans have that power.
I'd like to speak to it if I could, just for a minute. I think what the issues has been in the past was, if it gets to a point where we have 3 and 4 and 5 other non-committee members speaking at a committee meeting, all of a sudden we've got, close to the majority of the full board, and we get to the point, in my mind, where we're watering down the committee a little bit. Again, if it's a topic that's pertinent maybe for one particular member to speak, I don't have a problem with it, but again, I think at this point, I'm not sure I'm in favor of that. Member Erickson?
A member could always go to Chairman McIntyre, and if Chairman McIntyre wanted to take the chairperson out to the woodshed and let him know what he thought about that, I suppose Chairman McIntyre could, but I just don't think this rule's been abused. I mean, I think most people, it's like, hey, I tried to go to Justice and Erickson wouldn't let me speak, and and I've been to the 5 meetings now, and Erickson still won't let me speak. And so, I mean, Mr. Chairman, can you talk to Mr. Erickson about that? I mean, that's generally what we've done in the past. I mean, I think that's a good way to handle that.
All right. Any other comments? Okay, ready to vote on that part as amended. A roll call vote.
Member Barnett,
No.
Member Metzger,
No.
Member Went,
No.
Member Martin,
No.
Member Woolrab,
Yes,
Member Erickson,
No.
Member Solner.
No. So now we are going to vote on the items as a whole. Is that correct, Mr. Spanos?
That's correct, with the one amendment, adding the word written before report in paragraph 3.
All right. Everybody with that? Any more discussion? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. Roll call vote, please.
Member Barnett,
Yes.
Member Metzger,
Yes.
Member Went,
Yes.
Member Martin,
Yes.
Member Woolrab,
yes,
Member Erickson,
Yes.
Member Solner.
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, now we are ready for C, recommend amendment to chapter 20-11 of the County Board Rules to add the following. And under K, we've got 4 items. And again, we are going to look at these all at one motion. So is there any, I guess I need a motion and a second for that. Member Barnett. Is that a motion? And a second, Member Martin, actually, he raised his hand first. All right. Discussion. Member Woolrab.
in the interest of maybe simplicity or streamlining, I'm kind of wondering if we could just combine number 2 and 3 here under K. Since committee chair is any board member. It's, and maybe somebody can explain why we have separated out committee chairs from any other board member here, and maybe I'll agree with that, but it just seems like we could subsume that under any board member.
Member Barnett, I believe you authored these.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can speak to that. So right now, any member of the board has the option to bring like a resolution to the full board, right? Uh, I could not, and if I missed it, someone please, by all means, do correct me. I could not find anywhere where it specifically said in our current rules that a committee chair has the opportunity to bring a resolution to or an ordinance to their respective committee. And I mean, if you're the committee chair, that feels like something you should have the authority to do. So that's why they're two separate ones. Number 2 preserves what we already have in place, and number 3 gives formally in written language gives the committee chair the opportunity to bring resolutions or ordinances to their respective committee.
Yeah, I guess I would comment on that. I believe, at least in my mind, we kind of have that already, but I'm like you, I don't think it's actually written down anywhere. So to include that in the document as a written item may not be a bad idea. Other questions? Member Martin?
Just a comment. Last I checked, every committee chair is a board member, right?
That's how it's supposed to be.
So, yeah, I think I agree that I don't know that there's a reason to separate them.
Well, I'm sorry, Mr.
ahead.
Chairman,
That's right. Member Erickson?
well, there is a distinction in the rule here. I mean, in number 2, it's the rule, as Member Barnett has said, is that a board member could always bring a resolution or ordinance before the full board. But number 3 refers to a specific to their committee chair's respective committee. So the committee chair can bring a resolution to their respective committee. And so there is a distinction there. I think that's your intent, Member Barnett, that distinction stay in place. I mean, there's a reason why they're separated there. And I think that's a good reason to keep them separated, because a board member, that's always been, number 2 has always been the rule, as long as I can remember being on the county board, that a board member could always bring a resolution before the full board. So that I don't know that that's really changing anything. And I think number 3 is codifying it, saying the committee chair, who should have some power over his committee, can bring a resolution ordinance to his respective committee. Now, I suppose if a board member did not like the committee chair's respective resolution, they could bring their own resolution to the full board. I mean, there's still a way to get to solve that, but but I do agree that committee chairs should not just be taking care of Robert's Rules of Order and have nothing else to do. I mean, there's got to be something to being a committee chair. So I think they do need to stay separated.
Member Wolrab?
Thank you. Yeah, I understand now. Thank you for explaining that, Member Barnett, the reason for this. And so is it then correct that if a non-committee chair board member wanted to bring a resolution or ordinance, they could only bring it to the full county board, or could they also bring it to their own committee, assuming they're on the appropriate committee?
They would not be able to. A board member would not be able to bring a resolution or an ordinance to to the committees that they sit on, or any other committee. I mean, to my knowledge, that's the way it functions right now.
So although they could bring it to their committee chair, and if that person agreed, they could bring it, that chair would then bring it to the committee?
Right,
that-
yes.
Is that how it actually works or should work? I don't know.
I thought that's the way it works. I don't know how often we actually, you know, I don't know. It's feels like a rarity that a member who isn't a chair, you know, would bring something like that forward. But I don't know if Administrator Rodriguez has anything that she would like to share since I'm putting her on the spot. Um, but I think that's the way it's supposed to function now.
Thank you, Member Barnett, for putting me on the spot. I've been in my rule book trying to find any other language that would lend to the conversation, but at this point, it is my understanding that if a board member in general, and this is under 20-11 subpart E, wants to bring resolutions, reports, and communications, then they can do so and present it. So I think I'm looking at the right one. Hold on one second. Yes, and that is covered there. But I don't believe there is anything in the rules indicating that a member of a committee on their own would bring a resolution to that committee or an ordinance. And so certainly any other staff present that have a different opinion can chime in, but that is my input on that particular matter. Thank you.
Member Barnett?
Yeah, I mean, I believe looking. So if you scroll up or flip back on your pages, however you're viewing the document, on if you go back to the beginning of B, where it's BE and where E is stricken. Right now, the rules say um, any committee chair elected or appointed county official who desires to present any ordinance resolution, blah 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 blah, deliver the same to the administrators 6 days prior to the board meeting. So like right now, that only allows would allow board members to bring things forward to the full board meeting, the way the rules are currently written.
Member Wolrab?
Let me just, again, play devil's advocate just a little bit here. So let's assume that a non-committee chair had something, not a communication, but a resolution or ordinance that they wanted to have. It would seem to me a good place to begin with that, since we have a committee structure, would be in their the appropriate committee, assuming they were on that committee. You know, and I'm not saying go to another committee. I'm saying that, you know, transportation and so on and so on. But so I wonder if you would accept that because I know I've had other board members ask, how do I do this? And I know I've searched the rules and I'm like, I'm not sure, you know. So if a non-committee member of a committee wanted to bring a resolution or ordinance, they could bring it only by going through their chair and having the chair submit it. I mean, I think it would be good, if that's our intention, it might be good to clarify that here so people know how to do it. It wouldn't go straight, in that case, it wouldn't go straight to the full board. It would first come to committee where everything we operate on is properly is discussed there first. That's how we do everything if we can. Does that make sense?
Then are you suggesting that the number 2 isn't allowed at all then?
No, I wasn't suggesting that. I was suggesting that the first option would be to bring it through their committee to the committee, but through
Right.
their committee chair.
And if the chair
And-
didn't allow it, then they could go to the full board with it. Okay,
Right.
I'm with you on that. Member Erickson?
I mean, if a committee member wanted to bring it to the committee chair, they could do that. If the committee chair decides he or she didn't want to do it, then the board member could still go to the chairman and see if the chairman could bring it before executive, because I think the chairman runs executive. And if the chairman didn't want to bring it before executive, and then the board member still hasn't stopped, they got the option to use number 2 and bring it before the full board. So, I mean, you know, so I think that's the way the process works. I'll stand corrected if I'm wrong. but, I think Chairman McIntyre, as the chair of the executive committee, should have some authority over his executive committee. And, Josh Barnett, as chairman of the property committee, should have some authority over his property committee. But if a board member feels like, no one's listening to me, okay, I'll just go around all of you and I'll take it to the full board. They can, and that would be option 2. So I think that's what's intended here.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Member Wolrab?
So could I make an amendment propose an amendment that would say under 3, a board member desiring to bring a resolution or ordinance to their committee should submit it to their chair, and with their something along these lines, and with the chair's permission, it will go on that committee's agenda. And I'm not, I don't want to undercut the committee chairs. I just want to make it clear to board members how to begin the process. And it would seem to me the best process would be to, if possible, to start in a committee rather than, be in number 2 starts it with the full board, but I think we would want to start it anything if we can in a full committee first.
All right. Ms. Morlock, did you get that? She's typing away feverishly. Any other discussion? Would you need a second? Second by Member Barnett? Okay. Well, Julie, would you mind reading that back if you can?
I will do my best. The language that I kind of came up with, and I'm sure that we could tweak it a little bit, if anybody wants. This is just quickly doing it. Any board member that desires to present a resolution or ordinance to their respective committee should first request to present that resolution or ordinance through their committee chair for presentation to that committee.
Member Wolrab, okay with that? Chuck, is
Yes,
that
I
a
am.
question? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think it ought to say something about the committee chair. Then, I think we can shorten that. It's like, that can be presented to the committee chair, and at the committee chair's discretion, may present that to her committee. I don't know we can write that shorter.
All right. Hang
Because
on
That's what Member Wolrab's essentially saying.
hang on 1 second. Member Barnett?
May I suggest some alternate language?
All right.
I'll, so that we would be tacking this onto the end of number 3 there. Any board member may bring a resolution or ordinance to their assigned committee chair for consideration of placement on the agenda.
Member Wolrab, how's that sound?
That sounds good. I would, just a small tweak here. I think we should put number 3 ahead of number 2. Make 3, 2, and 2, 3, since that would be the normal order of the process.
Okay. I think we can do that without an amendment. Member Erickson?
I can't vote for that because I just think you need to say something about the committee chair's discretion. You ought to make it clear in the rule that, okay, yeah, you can bring it, but that doesn't mean it's going to be on the agenda. It's at the committee chair's discretion whether to place it on the agenda or not place it on the agenda. I think you need to say that because we don't have that. I'm sorry.
I'll just say step and say that as the motion maker, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Ms. Morlock, are you coming up with something? Are you trying to do 3 things at one time?
I guess I would ask Chuck, so right now, Mr. Barnett, and I tried to type this as fast as I could, Mr. Barnett.
I can
Um,
reread it if you.
That would be awesome if you want to reread that, and then maybe we could find a place to put Chuck's suggestion in there. I apologize.
So I have it right now. Any board member may bring a resolution or ordinance to their any board member may bring a resolution or ordinance to their assigned committee chair for the chair's consideration of placement on the agenda. Any board member may bring a resolution or ordinance to their assigned committee chair for the chair's consideration of placement on the agenda.
Such item may be added to the agenda with the permission of the chair. Okay, well, I think we have the gist of what we're trying to do here. Again, this is gonna be a recommendation to the executive committee. So, when it gets to executive, if it does, we can tweak it again if we need to. But Chuck, I do agree with what you're saying. I do think somewhere it needs to state that the chairman either allows or doesn't allow it. All right? Questions? Any other comments? Okay, so we are going to vote on number 3 with the amendment. Correct, Mr. Spanos?
That's correct.
Okay, any other discussion?
Actually, Chairman, you can vote on the entire K, the amendment first, and then vote on so you're just voting on the amendment at this point.
Okay, we are just voting on the amendment. Not as amended, only the amendment. Okay. Everybody got that? Roll call vote.
Member Barnett,
Yes.
Member Metzger. Member Went,
Yes.
Member Martin,
Yes.
Member Woolrab,
Yes.
Member Erickson,
Yes.
Member Soldner.
Yes. Okay, now we are gonna vote on letter K, 1, 2, 3 as a whole, and 4. Any other discussion? All right, roll call vote on that.
Member Barnett,
Yes.
Member Metzger. Member Went,
Yes.
Member Martin,
Yes.
Member Woolrab,
Yes.
Member Erickson,
Yes.
Chairman Soldner.
Yes. Okay, it passes. Next item is D. Recommend amendment to chapter 20-12B of the County Board Rules to strike and add the following. And since it's small, I will read it. Strike invocation and add moment of silent prayer. This is a rather short one, which I like, so I would entertain a motion. Member Woolrab, second. Member Martin. Okay, any discussion, questions? Member Metzger.
I guess I would rather see invocation or moment of silent prayer versus striking invocation.
All right, is that an amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to that amendment? Second by Member Went. I'm sorry, Member Went, is that a second?
That's a second.
Okay. Okay, discussion on that. Member Erickson?
Yeah, how do you foresee that playing out, Member Metzger?
Whoever that's their month to come forward and they're assigned and they can either have a moment of silent prayer or they can have an invocation.
Okay.
All right. Other discussion? Member Wolrab.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm, as the original motion or person who submitted this, my thought on this was that, having this, as I said, I think in the last meeting, having this period at the beginning of our meeting is a nice separation from what we were doing previously before entering the meeting, where we can take a moment to reflect and say, well, I'm not working, I'm not with my kids or whatever. I'm concentrating on county business and it's important, and I wish to pray, or I wish to, just momentarily reflect on the importance of this. But I'm going to go back to my original reason for doing this, which is that prayer is a very personal thing. And I think we can appreciate that. Probably all of us have gone to other religious organizations and places of worship, but we've done that, because we're at just somebody's wedding or funeral or whatever, but we've done that out of our own desire and choice, and we don't have to do that. People who come to the McLean County Board are coming because they need to do their public business one way or the other. They're asking us for something, they're trying to get the information they need, and so on. And really, we have a county that is dependent on people now from many, many places and many walks of life. We have very large businesses who recruit people. We have healthcare. We have universities. In small employers as well as large employers, and some large employers that are now supported by tax initiatives. And they all need people to come, and they need people to be comfortable here, to stay here, so that their businesses and the county can function properly. And I think the most we can do, one of the small things we could do would be to make sure people are comfortable when they come to our meetings. And with prayer being as personal as it is, I think the easiest way to do that is to simply and always consistently make it silent. So we can each do it in our own way as we choose, and feel comfortable with it.
All right. Other discussion? Member Went?
Yeah, I just wanted to put this in. I will vote for the amendment, but then I'm going to vote against the thing in total. Congress opens its sessions with a prayer, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't. And if whatever religion wants to come and issue a prayer, I would more than accept that. So that's just my opinion on the whole thing. Thank you.
Other discussion? Okay, we're ready to vote on the amendment. Roll call vote.
Member Barnett,
Yes.
Member Metzger. Yes. Member Went,
Yes.
Member Martin,
Yes.
Member Woolrab,
No,
Member Erickson,
Yes.
Chairman Soldner.
No. Okay, so the amendment passes. And we're going to discuss it now as amended. Any other discussion? Member Barnett?
I guess it's, if you'll indulge me for a second, Mr. Chairman, one thing I would like to see, and I don't know that we necessarily need an amendment to make this happen, but I hope that if members do come and it's their turn that month to deliver a moment of silence or an invocation or whatever it may be, I hope that people feel comfortable, and I should say publicly are encouraged. So I'm publicly encouraging folks to do that in their own faith tradition. It feels, I guess I'll say personally, I think our tradition certainly has been Christian toward the Protestant lean of things, which is fine. But I would like to see as different faith backgrounds begin to have seats on the board, that we would encourage members to come and express themselves as is appropriate for them and their own tradition. Thank you.
All right. Other discussion on the motion as amended? All right, seeing none, we're ready to vote. Roll call vote.
Member Barnett,
Yes.
member, I'm sorry, I lost track here. Member Metzger. Yes. Member Woolrab,
Yes,
member Martin,
Yes.
member Went,
No,
member Erickson.
I'm sorry, we're voting invocation or moment of silent prayer, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Yes.
Member Solner.
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, we are now ready for letter E. I gotta make sure I'm right here. And we've got letters V and W. Now, Mr. Spanos, is this like 1 and 2, or is this V, or is this different letters?
I'm sorry.
So we're under letter E. Are we gonna take these all as one motion?
You certainly may,
Okay,
if you choose to do it that way.
Okay.
That's the way you can do it.
and they both have to deal with public hearings. One's for the budget, and the other one's for the capital improvement plan.
Correct.
All right? So I would entertain a motion for both of those. Member Woolrab, second? Second by Member Martin. Okay, discussion? Anybody want to start? Member Martin?
In W, is mileage spelled right? Property tax mileage?
It's millage. It's a different word,
Millage.
actually.
Oh, okay, then it's probably spelled right.
Alright. Other discussion? Member Erickson?
No, I can explain why I'm voting no. I mean, I think the process is already satisfactory for the public to come and look at our budget and to look at the things that we do, and they come to committee meeting and look at, address that committee's budget. And so, as far as I know, we've already given public notice of our meetings, and on that agenda would be discussion of the budget. And, so I just don't know if it doesn't slow things down, because we always present our budget in September. And I don't know how that's gonna affect that, but, without hearing more, I just can't vote yes on it.
All right. Any other discussion? Member Went?
Yeah, I agree with Chuck, as I think the procedure that we currently have is adequate.
All right. Member Metzger, you have your hand up?
I will not vote for this. I think what we have is more than adequate. I think what we have are opportunities over and over again for the annual budget to be reviewed, discussed in great detail. And so I'm not sure a public hearing is necessary. I also know that as a township supervisor, we have multiple hearings, public hearings on levies and budgets and discussions at our meetings, and we don't get anyone to come. So they're more likely to come to our meetings as we have those discussions, just as we would have discussions at committee. And people, especially now, we have the opportunity to have everything on online as well as video, so I don't see a need. I know some people will say that this provides transparency. I think we have transparency in all of the work that we do today.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, roll call vote.
Member Barnett,
Uh-oh.
did I
Lost
lose
me.
Josh Barnett? Sorry, I wasn't looking up, I apologize. Member Metzger?
No.
Member Went?
No,
Member Martin?
No.
Member Woolrab?
No,
Member Erickson?
No,
Member Soldner?
No?
Member Barnett? I'll say it one more time just in case. Okay.
Okay. Next item, item F, recommend amendment to chapter 20-15K of the County Board Rules to add the following. And again, you can read it, it's in our document here. Is there any, I would entertain a motion in a second, please. Motion by Wolrab, second. Second, anyone?
gosh,
One more time. Someone want to second it? Okay, motion fails for lack of a second. Let's see. Next item is G. Recommend amendment to chapter 20-16A of the McLean County Board Rules to add the following. Number 4, Legislative Committee, and again, it has 2 parts. And I want to make sure this is right. Mr. Spanos, we can do this all at one time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Motion to approve letter G with 4 A and B all at one time. Someone want to make the motion? Member Barnett, second. Anyone? Anyone want to make a second? All right, one last time, second, anyone? Okay, letter G fails due to a lack of a second. All right. That's all we have on the agenda. I was going to ask Ms. Rodriguez, do you have anything else to add, or Mr. Spanos, or anyone else from administration?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry. Who's got their
Member
hand up? Oh,
Barnett
there we
has his
go.
hand up.
Josh, go ahead. Member Barnett.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I stepped away for a couple minutes. So letter G just failed. Aren't we required to have descriptions and responsibilities of all of our committees in the rules book? Because there's absolutely nothing in the rules book right now that gives responsibilities to the legislative subcommittee.
Mr. Spanos, you want to answer that?
Well, I'm not aware of a requirement in the rules. I can certainly look that requires a description, but Mr. Barnett is correct that there is a creation of a legislative subcommittee, but there is no statement with respect to what the legislative subcommittee is charged with doing.
I guess to go another step further, since I'm the chair of that subcommittee, I guess since there's no general description describing what it can do, I guess I can have that committee do whatever I feel like.
right.
Dylan's rule.
It does serve
Right,
as a,
yeah,
that's
right,
right.
and Dylan's rule.
It does serve as a subcommittee for the executive committee, so that to the extent the executive committee would send a charge to the legislative committee, that's within the power or the authority of the executive committee to charge the legislative committee with a function, I think that would be acceptable.
All right,
All right. I just thought it was odd that we have a committee sitting out there with no description in the rules, but we have descriptions for the rest of them. I just wanted to clarify that with leadership. Thank you.
all right. So, this committee will meet again, May 6th at 4:30 PM. I assume it's going to be in this office, in this, room. But it will deal with the redistricting, issue that we're dealing with now with the meetings with the, special meetings of the executive committee. Other than that, I see nothing else on our agenda, so this meeting is